It was a chance visit to the Dominican Republic that would change my life. I'd heard it was a place to go for great beaches, great nightlife, and an affordable cost of living. It was never my intention to go with the idea to live there, but when I was there for a holiday, I immediately fell in love with the vibes, the culture, and the lifestyle. It was very different to where I was from, back in the UK, where my days were dull and boring, and I had to go to work sitting in traffic in the dark during winter. I wanted to do something different, yet I didn't know what I wanted to do. I always had a yearly escape. I'd been going to different countries for years, and I'd spend 2 or 3 weeks checking out those places. I usually had a very good time, to countries such as Brazil, Colombia, Japan, and lots in between. I always looked forward to it every year. I didn't really like my job, and going on holiday was my escape. When I decided to go to the Dominican Republic, it was just meant to be like any other holiday. Go there for 3 weeks, see what it was all about, and learn about somewhere new. Little did I know that by going to the Dominican Republic, a series of events would happen, a series of meetings would occur, and I would find myself moving there to start a new life. When I was coming to land at the airport, if I had have thought that it was even a remote possibility, I would have shaken my head as if to say no way. The Dominican Republic was about to change my life for the better, until it changed my life for the worse, and it made me have to start all over again doing something that I'd always dreamed of getting away from. It was in 2022 when I arrived in the Dominican Republic. My first overseas trip since halfway through 2019, and I couldn't wait. My choice was between the Dominican Republic and Mexico because I'd never been there before, but I thought I would go to Mexico next time. It doesn't feel like very long ago. It feels like only yesterday when I was at the Dominican Republic for the first time. Yet the amount of things that have happened during the course of that time since then makes me feel like it was a lot longer ago than it actually was. Arriving at the airport in Santo Domingo, I was initially quite underwhelmed because the airport was nothing like the last place I went to the year in 2019 in Malaysia. In Asia, everything seemed to be modern and new, yet this airport kind of reminded me of the airport that they had in Tenerife. When I talked to somebody about it, they looked at me like I'd gone insane, but that was the vibe I got from it anyway, regardless as if it was correct or not. The taxi to my hotel downtown was around $35. I didn't think that was too bad considering it was around 30 minutes away. We arrived at night time, and while it's always fun arriving at an airport at night and seeing the lights of the city below you, you don't really get a good first impression when you're driving to the hotel because it's so dark and you can't really see anything. So my first impressions would have to come the day after. When the following day came, I was pleasantly surprised by everything I saw around me. I don't know what it was or if anybody else experienced this, but you might go to many different places and always have a great time. Yet when you go to one place, it stands out as being the place that you prefer more than everywhere else you've been. You don't really know why you feel like this and you can't quite put your finger on it. But these were the feelings I was getting on my first day walking around Santo Domingo. I was only going to be in the capital for a few days, take it all in, have a look, and then I was going to be heading to a resort for a week before deciding what to do from there. I always liked to leave the last 7 to 10 days of my holiday completely unplanned, so I could make decisions on the ground. But it was just something about the Dominican Republic that really connected with me in a way that even today I'm unable to describe why. When the next day came, I was blessed with the best weather I could have hoped for. And I felt it was quite weird in the sense that you've got the capital city, yet next to the capital city, you've got crystal clear ocean. Usually, in a capital city in another part of the world, even if it was next to the sea, it wouldn't be anything special. Yet this seemed to be the best of both worlds. A great city next to a great ocean. I loved it, and I started walking around and exploring the area outside my hotel. I initially went to the old area of the city. I since learned that it was one of the oldest cities in the Americas, 500 years old if I recall, and seeing the mix of old world and new world mixed together was a great experience. I went to check out the closest beach, and while it wasn't as good as some of the other beaches in the country, it was still great, and I started enjoying the local cuisine, which I thought was fantastic. So far, on the first day being there, I am really liking the country, in a way that didn't feel the same that I liked other places. I was already imagining what it would be like to live there, starting a life from scratch there, on a business and doing something. All these things were going through my head, and I don't know why. I need to keep saying that. I really don't know why I was drawn to the country so much, but I was, and over the next few days in the capital, that love of the country got even stronger. I'd booked a week in a resort in another part of the country, and I was a bit disappointed to be leaving the capital so soon. But that's why I left open the latter part of my holiday for eventualities like this. I had a great time at the resort. I spent most of my time just relaxing and rejuvenating after the whole COVID situation. I spent most of the time in the resort, but I did venture out from time to time to go for meals outside, going into some bars, and I started to speak to locals, speaking to girls, and I met a girl that went on a few dates with me during my time at the resort. It didn't go much further than that, though. After that week ended, I was feeling like I was in the best place in the world, and I headed back to Santo Domingo with the intention to just take it day by day and see how things went. I arrived back early evening, went out for a meal, went back to my hotel, and just crashed until the following day. It was that day that I was just out, exploring as normal. I went to a few parts of the city that I hadn't been to before, went for a great lunch at a restaurant that was recommended on TripAdvisor, and after that I went back to the hotel, had a shower, change of clothes, and I headed out into Zona Colonial. It was there that I was sitting in a bar, with a drink, as you do, and I was approached by a local girl who was also drinking in the same bar. I knew what the game was in this case, but it didn't bother me because she just drew me in and I felt like I had to talk to her. I was 48 years old, and when she told me she was 26, I was hesitant at first, but I don't know what it was about her. I just found myself talking to her more and more for the rest of the evening. That evening, following all the way to the next morning, and we go together around the city, and I'm just spending all my time with her, not really knowing why I am. I do know why I am, if I'm being honest. She was gorgeous. She was everything I looked for in a girl, and I had visions right there and then that every second of the time I was there, I wanted to be with her, and I was thinking that I wanted to move here without even knowing why. I have to keep saying that yet again because I was loving everything about it, and she was just my dream girl. It's amazing how you have these ideas and visions about what you want to do. I didn't know why I wanted to do this, but she was with me for the rest of my time in the country. And by the end of it, I was of the mind that I was going to sell up at home and come back to the Dominican Republic and try to have a go at expat life for the first time in my life. I'd always dreamed of moving to a different country, but up until then it was only a dream, something that other people did and I would never have had the bravery to do. But when I met her and developed such a strong connection with her so quickly, it didn't feel like I needed bravery to leave my country anymore. It felt like I would have needed bravery to stay where I was because I would have been missing out on just how much the world had to offer, and I would have let it slip past me. I knew I would need to return home first. It's not like I could just stay there and never go back, but I fell in love with this girl. There's no point trying to sugarcoat it and say it for anything other than what it was. I fell for her and that was it. I wanted to be with her, and I would do anything to make that possible. She was very open and honest about her life, what she did before she met me, and I felt the fact that she was prepared to share what she did was a positive, because her past was her past, and all I was interested in was our future. What happened in the past was immaterial, as far as I was concerned. Although for many people, I get that they would be scared away if they met a girl in similar situations. I always felt like I was open-minded. I wasn't there to judge people or come up with reasons why I was better than somebody else, because I never felt like that. I wasn't better than her, we were both equals. And the way she acted around me, the way she smiled, the way she did things, just like I always wanted when I was in a relationship. I'd never been married back at home in the UK. I came out of a relationship about 5 years before I got into this one, and I only really casually dated since then. I never felt like I developed a deep enough connection with anybody, and I didn't really want to get to know anyone to the level I wanted to get to know her. How I managed to develop a connection with her in such a short amount of time, I don't know. It's just one of those things. I left the Dominican Republic and vowed that I'd be in touch with her as soon as I got home. I remember her looking at me and just saying, "No, you won't. You're not going to call me." But I did. I arrived back home to my house and called her, and she answered, and she said she was happy that I called. She was everything I dreamed of, and I wanted to somehow make things work between us. I told my friend about the situation I was in, and everyone told me to be careful. Yet it's the people who were telling me to be careful that were the same people who were living lives that they wanted ever so much to escape from themselves. They were working jobs that they didn't want to do, making enough money to cover the bills but nothing else on top. So I felt in that way that they needed to be careful that they wouldn't just work themselves into oblivion and wish they'd done something when they still had a chance. I didn't want to be someone who was in his 60s or 70s looking back at that moment in life and regretting that I didn't take the chance when it was available to me. I wanted to take the chance and I wanted to make it work. The question was, what was I going to do to be able to make it work? That was what I still hadn't worked out. But I did know what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it quickly as I could. I knew that girl I'd met wasn't going to wait for me forever. We did agree together that if I sent her some money until I could make it back, that she would wait for me. I told her that what I was prepared to do is do this for 3 months, and that should be how long it took for me to get back. And I gave her the confidence that by doing that, she could go and stay with her family for a while, which wasn't in a place near the city. She said she would, so I believed her. I don't even know if she did that or not, or if she was just a very good actor, but it did seem to be that she was with her family when we spoke on the time, because we could speak on video. But that was it then. I wanted to be in the Dominican Republic. I wanted to be with her. But the question was, how do I get myself in a position to do that? In terms of savings, I didn't have that much. I had about £100,000 of equity in my house, but the mortgage was more than that. So if I rented it out, the rent would only just cover the mortgage, and it wouldn't give me any money to live on. I had a few other items that were worth a bit of money, but nothing substantial. So I suppose that I already knew what the answer was going to be. I was going to need to sell my house and sell everything I had, and then take a chance on moving to the Dominican Republic, progressing with the relationship I was wanting to be in so badly, and looking for something to do that made some extra money. At that point, I had no idea what I could do. I had no idea if what I wanted to do was even remotely sensible, but I knew that at the very worst, I would have to return home and start all over again. I'd be worse off, but I would have had an experience of a lifetime that I could look back and think at least I tried. I spent a lot of time convincing myself it was the right thing to do. That what I'm trying to do and get across is to say that I thought about things very carefully, and I didn't just jump in, although it did seem that I was doing things very quickly. I was thinking that things would work out, and eventually my house sold. I sold everything else, and I ended up with about £140,000, which allowed me to start a very different chapter of my life. Before anyone says that's not enough money to retire, I wasn't going to retire. I was going to spend time first getting to know this person that I'd fallen in love with even more, and from there I was going to try to develop myself in the country. Maybe start a business. Everything was up in the air, but I wanted to have a go. You can't blame anyone for wanting to have a go. So it was actually about 4 months later when I was able to return. I just found myself going back again, this time for what I hoped would be good. I couldn't wait. It was a dream of mine that I never thought would actually come true, but here it was coming true right in front of me, and I was sitting on the plane shaking at the thought of my life and how amazing it was going to be. What happened would be a series of positives, but mainly negatives, love, loss, and the realization that living in a different country is a lot more difficult than many people make it out to be. I think it's different depending on where you come from as well, and where you're going. Because I came from the UK, although the UK has fallen a long way, and other people from countries in Europe and America, for example, have things better than people do in the UK, I still had a lot of things that I expected to happen. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but if someone was moving to the UK, for example, it might be easier for them to make things work. I don't know. That's what I was thinking at the moment. But I am now going to tell you exactly what happened. When I landed back in the Dominican Republic, this time it was not like the first time, when I was just there for a few weeks to see somewhere new. This time I was coming to live and to see if I could make a life with this girl that I'd met. When I came out of the airport, she was actually there waiting for me, she waving and smiling, and I felt like everything I'd told myself I wanted was right here. We got a taxi and went into the city, and I'd already arranged a small hotel room for the first few days so that, I could settle in on the ground and find where to move after. It was just a normal hotel that I'd stayed in the first time, and then from there, it was the idea to look for somewhere to live. I found myself spending time with her in the early stages, just going out for meals, walking around the city, spending time by the sea. She introduced me to some of her friends, and I bought a couple of things for an apartment that I rented not long after I arrived. It was only a small, cheap one, but it was just a base to get things started. I just wanted to enjoy being with her in the early stages, and I didn't want to think about business or anything like that straight away. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, and every morning I woke up and I could not believe that I'd actually done it. I'd actually left the UK and come to live in a place that I really wanted to be in, with a person that I really loved. I wasn't bored anymore or stuck like I used to be. But I always was under the understanding that I do need to make some money at some stage. The weeks just carried on like that, and I started to feel an even closer connection to her. I was seeing her in her country and with her people, and I liked how she was around them and how she was around me. We went to a couple of places outside of the city and stayed a few nights in small hotels. Sometimes in cheap hotels, and sometimes we'd spend a bit more when I felt like treating us. I paid for everything, and of course I did. I did not care how much it cost to start with, because I thought it was part of starting a life together. We talked at night about what we could do in the future, and where we might live, and how we could make it work. I did plan to stay for good, and that's all I thought about. According to her, she didn't really care what we did, as long as we were together. And, of course, I believed everything she said. I felt like I wanted to believe her, and it seemed like she was telling the truth, so we started to look around more, just to get a feel of what people did. I talked to people who had small places and asked them how much it cost to get set up, bars and restaurants and small guest houses and things. I was not in a rush, but I didn't want to watch my money go away to nothing from where it was. I needed to try something first instead of just spending for a good time. It was around the third month of being there that I decided to open a small bar near the beach. It seemed like the kind of place that always had people coming and going, and I thought if I kept it simple and tried to keep the costs under control, it would pay for itself, cover the rent, food, and give me extra money on top for the future. I actually met a guy who said he could deal with the papers, and he showed me a unit that was closed not long before. It already had a counter and most of the equipment there. I thought it was pretty interesting and a good location, so I paid £20,000 for the deposit, and the first month, I didn't want to lose it. This was sort of key money, I think they called it, where you had to pay to take over. I then put in around £15,000 into stock and furniture, and I needed to make a few small repairs. I think it was about another £3,000 in repairs on top. I also paid this person £2,000, or thereabouts. That was just to cover the paperwork for the fees and other bits and pieces on top. I am talking in pounds here because that's just easier for me, and I think it's easier for everyone else. But feel free to do the conversions yourself. I kept telling myself that I needed time in order to make it work, and it felt like the amount of money I spent, we had plenty of time to make it work. All in, I put around $45,000 into that place. That was for everything, and it added up. It was quite a lot of money, but I was quite confident at the same time that things were going to work out for the better. I still had close to £95,000 at this point, and that was a lot of money. I just needed to be careful. So everything was looking good, at least I thought it was. I even bought 2 scooters, and that was about £4,000 between them. I thought we could rent them out and have a little bit of extra income on the side. It was a very high footfall area, and that was what I was thinking about. It can't have been the second or third day that I was renting those out that one of them came back with damage and I had to pay for that. And after that, though, they just seemed to sit there, and it wasn't a big loss, but we didn't get as many people hiring them as I thought. It was just one of those things that you try and it didn't work. Then the thing starts to happen with regards to her family. That was something that I never even considered. I found myself sending money to her family, just in bits and pieces here and there, but there's always seemed to be something that money was needed for. She wasn't from the city, she was from a very poor family, and the way she looked at me was like it was my job to help because she was with me, and therefore she couldn't help. So I find myself spending £200 here, £300 there, £500 once for an amount of money, and I can't even remember what it was for. I probably gave around £5,000 total to her family while we're still in the early stages of getting this bar set up. I'm just doing it because I love her and I don't know what else I should be doing. I told myself, though, it was fine because they were her family. I wanted to help. I didn't want to come across as being someone who didn't care because I really did care. That's the thing. I cared and I wanted her to know I did. I wanted to make her happy. Of course I did. And I wanted us to live like a normal couple. But I could see that the balance going down all the time in my account, and I knew that we had to move and make sure this bar could be open properly soon. Not long after, while we're still waiting for the paperwork for the bar to come through, a friend of hers actually said that there was a small café available as well. It was £12,000 to take over the lease and the equipment, and if I put in another £3,000 of small change as they put in, then we'd be able to get that open even quicker than the bar. The problem with the bar was we weren't getting the licensing through, and we'll get to that later on. But I did decide to open that as well and have two different businesses going, just to not have all my eggs in one basket. I quickly realised that the cafe was probably a very bad idea. Within weeks of opening, the takings were nowhere near enough to cover everything, and then I find myself putting more money in every week just to keep the door open. That was a nightmare scenario. And at the same time, we're still waiting to get the paperwork for the bar. I guess I probably put in another £10,000 into that cafe, and then the news came about the bar. 3 months of waiting. 3 months of trying to run the cafe and losing money and feeling like a total failure. And then the man who was meant to be helping me comes back and says that, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get the license. What I can do is help you, but it's going to cost you another few £1,000s. I tried to understand what the issue was, but he couldn't really explain it, so I just had to believe him and I handed over the money. And then a few months later, again, nothing. It turned out that he actually wasn't doing what he said he was doing, and I should have done it myself. But I got to the point now where everything was too late, and I'd done some incredibly stupid things, sinking money into 2 different businesses, without even knowing the person who I was doing it with. He showed me round, he was from an agency, but he had no intention of getting the license. I should have done it myself or employed a proper lawyer, but now it was looking like it was going to be too late because I'd spent all this money. I couldn't believe it. All that money gone out, and probably I was down to, £59,000 at this point. That was the first time that I felt fear. I thought it would take years to get to that point, and it had taken just under 1. I told myself I would stop and try not to worry about it. I tried not to worry about it, but I couldn't help worrying about it because it was all I was thinking about. Just how quickly things can go from being a dream into a nightmare is quite hard to understand. A few months later, I completely cut the losses on those 2 businesses. The biggest failure of my life, that's how I like to call them. And all throughout the same time, my girlfriend is trying to help, but not helping well enough. When she was speaking to that person about the situation, she never really gave me a solid answer about what was going on. And it was just one of those I was probably scammed kind of scenarios, and it's even difficult for me to talk about now. When the second year rolled around, no businesses and a lot of lost money, I had to try to make the money I did have stretch a lot further. I moved to an even cheaper place with my girlfriend, and that saved a few £100s a month. I sold the scooter, the one that wasn't damaged, and I lost some money on it, but I recouped a little bit. I even sold a camera I had and some headphones, and I only got £40 for them. but it was just a little bit of extra money to try to buy me time until I could find something else to do. Of course, throughout this time, her family are still getting money. A dentist bill was one of the things that came up. Just so random as if it was manufactured out of thin air, and I couldn't believe that I kept giving them the money. The problem was I was in love with my girlfriend, and I even had plans to marry her. Not only that, my intention was to get married after the business was successful, but the business had failed and I'd lost a lot of money. Not long after, I'm down to under £40,000 and I couldn't believe it. How had I lost £100,000 in just slightly over a year? I worked it out and I knew where I put the money. I trusted the wrong people. I trusted my girlfriend that I was giving money to her family even though I shouldn't have been. But most of all, I gave a lot of money to her as well. I didn't know what to do. There was a day, though, that I remember as being one of the worst. I walked into the bedroom and I saw her bag open on the bed. She'd left it in a rush. I was having a look around to see if I could find any keys, and then I just discovered a receipt from a car dealer which was for a down payment. I saw her name on it and the amount I recognized because that was an amount I sent for her family the week before. I can't remember what she said her family needed the money for, but it didn't seem to add up anymore, and then I'm thinking, hang on, has she been using this money for other things? I tried to sort of ignore it until I could speak to her about it, but I was thinking that perhaps I was being ripped off by her. It made me feel sick, didn't know what to do. How easy was it for her to get money out of me? I didn't even realize, so I knew I needed to talk with her about it. I kept going for a few more weeks because I didn't want to accept what I was starting to believe. I stopped going out, didn't really buy anything that I didn't need, and I told her that we needed to keep things tight for a while. She said that was fine, but I could tell by the look on her face that she didn't like that. She wanted me to continue giving money to her family, yet when I found out the truth about where the money was actually going, that's when I started to feel like I had just been played by her. When I mentioned the receipt just on the off chance, she looked really startled, as if that was something I was never meant to find out about. I quickly tried to push her when she was feeling uncomfortable, and she just broke out and said, that was for my boyfriend's car. The money that I'd been sending to her family wasn't even going to her family. Some of it was, she said, but most of it she gave to her boyfriend to buy a car. You have a boyfriend? I thought I was your boyfriend. That's the first thing I said to her. And she just said, oh, don't worry about it. He's my local boyfriend. It's not the same as you. I don't have any problems with you. I love you just the same. I didn't believe her. How could anyone believe such nonsense? I couldn't believe that situation. I couldn't believe I'd given my life back at home for a girl who had a boyfriend to a local, and she'd taken my money to buy a car for him. I didn't know what to do. One thing I did do, though, was write down the numbers because I wanted to know, actually, on paper, how much I'd lost. It was nearly the entire £140,000. Everything had gone. Every single thing had gone. Not only that, my girlfriend, who I was hoping to marry and have a family with and live with forever, had a boyfriend that she didn't tell me about. And, to top it off, to make matters even worse, she took the money that I was giving to her for her family and bought a car for her boyfriend with it. You couldn't even make that up. I was appalled and disgusted, and that was when we separated. I never thought that failure could be as bad as that. I loved her so much that I think I was off guard with what I was doing. The person who helped me find the bar and get the lease, I don't even know if that was a real person or not. I mean, he was a real person, but was he connected to her in any way? Did the money that I pay even go to anything? Was it going to the owner? Was it going to him? Or is it going to her? All these things I don't even know, but when I look back and try to think about it, I have no idea even what to think about it. I just want to say that I returned home with absolutely nothing. I had enough to put myself up in a new apartment, the cheapest of the cheap, and enough to last me a few months until I found a new job. I got that job, and then I started to realize what I'd done. I wasted my life savings, my house, and everything for a dream, and the dream failed. Not only that, it failed so dramatically that it didn't even give me 2 years of a good time. I had a good time for perhaps a month or two, And as soon as I started to do something, as soon as she started asking for money, that's when everything came crashing down. And I wouldn't wish that on even my worst enemy.